So today I want to take you inside a moment that the world is watching, but almost nobody truly understands what's actually happening. Because on the surface, what you're seeing looks like headlines about Arctic ice melting, climate change, environmental concern. But beneath that surface is something far more significant, something that will reshape global power for the next 50 years. And while America and the world focus on Asia, on the Middle East, on Iran, on China's threats in the South China Sea, Russia is quietly claiming the Arctic. Russia is building military bases. Russia is establishing dominance in a region that is about to become the most strategically important area on the planet. And here's the question no one is asking. And I want you to really think about this. America was supposedly the world's strongest military power. America has bases across the globe. America has the world's most advanced military. So why is Russia dominating the Arctic while America barely has a presence there? Why is America letting Russia establish hegemony over a region with massive resources, massive strategic importance, and massive future consequences? And the answer to that question is the key to understanding everything that happens over the next 50 years. Because Russia is not conquering the Arctic through military invasion. Russia is not facing American military opposition. Russia is simply moving into a power vacuum, a vacuum created by American distraction elsewhere. And that is the real story. America is losing the Arctic, not through defeat, but through neglect. All right, now let's slow this down and really unpack what is actually happening here. Because the game board here is more complex than most people realize, and the consequences are more significant than most people understand. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like I'm overanalyzing climate change, but let me walk you through the analytical framework I use to understand these situations. I call it strategic analysis, and it has 3 pillars. First, I look at incentives, not what countries say publicly, but what they actually need. What must they achieve? What are the core objectives driving their decisions? Why does Russia want the Arctic? What does the Arctic give Russia that it doesn't already have? Second, I look at constraints. What are the unchangeable realities limiting what's possible? Geography, military capacity, economic resources, climate, technology. These constraints set the boundaries of what any nation can actually accomplish. Third, I look at power vacuums. When a region matters strategically, but nobody is defending it, someone will eventually move in. Power vacuums don't remain empty, they get filled. And if America is not filling the Arctic power vacuum, then someone else will. Russia understands this. Russia is filling the vacuum while America is distracted. Now, I want you to understand something very important. This analysis is not about ideology. This is not about Russia being good or bad. This is not about climate change being real or not real. Those are separate questions. What I'm doing here is asking a structural question. I'm asking, what does the game board actually look like in the Arctic? What are the pieces? What are the incentives? And what does that tell us about what will actually happen? Once you ask those questions with clarity, the future becomes visible. So let's apply this framework. Let's look at what each player actually wants and what constraints they face. Let's start with Russia. What does Russia say it wants? Russia says it wants to develop the Arctic for peaceful economic purposes. Russia says it wants access to Arctic resources. Russia says it has a right to develop its Arctic territory. That is the official narrative. That is what Russian leaders announce. Now, what does Russia actually want? Russia wants something much more fundamental. Russia wants to prevent the Arctic from becoming a region of Western dominance. Russia wants to ensure that if the Arctic becomes strategically important, and it will, Russia will control it. Russia is not primarily interested in Arctic resources. Russia is interested in Arctic power, because whoever controls the Arctic will control the future geopolitical balance of the Northern Hemisphere. The Arctic is not just resources. The Arctic is positioning. The Arctic is the future chessboard where global power will be contested. So Russia's actual incentive is clear. Russia must dominate the Arctic now, before others can contest it later. Now flip the lens. What does America say it wants? America says it wants to address climate change. America says it wants to protect the Arctic environment. America says it wants to ensure international cooperation in the Arctic. That is the official position. But what does America actually want? America wants to maintain its ability to project power globally. America is stretched militarily across multiple theaters. America has troops in Europe, Asia, Middle East. America has limited capacity to add another region. America is distracted by immediate threats: Russia in Ukraine, China in Asia, Iran in Middle East. America does not see the Arctic as an immediate threat. America sees the Arctic as a region of secondary importance that can be addressed later when more pressing concerns are resolved. That is America's actual position, and that is the strategic error that Russia is exploiting. Now, what about China? What does China say it wants? China says it wants to participate in Arctic development. China says it is a near-Arctic state and should have a voice in Arctic policy. That is what China announces. But what does China actually want? China wants to secure Arctic shipping routes for its trade. China wants access to Arctic resources. China wants to prevent the Arctic from becoming a Western lake. China's developing Arctic strategy alongside Russia. China's investing in Arctic infrastructure. China is building relationships with Arctic nations. So China's actual incentive is to ensure the Arctic becomes multipolar. China wants the Arctic to be a space where China has influence, not a space where America dominates. And Russia and China's Arctic interests are aligned. Both want to prevent American dominance. Both want to establish their own influence. This creates a strategic coalition in the Arctic that America is not prepared to counter. Now here's where the game becomes very clear. The Arctic is becoming strategically important. Climate change is opening new shipping routes. Arctic resources are becoming accessible. Arctic geography is becoming militarily significant, and nobody has established dominance in this region yet. It is a power vacuum, a region of growing importance with no hegemon. In geopolitics, power vacuums do not remain empty. Someone fills them. Russia understands this. Russia is filling the vacuum. America has not realized the Arctic is becoming important. America is filling other vacuums, trying to contain China in Asia, trying to manage Iran in Middle East. But America is not filling the Arctic vacuum. And by the time America realizes the Arctic matters, Russia will have already established dominance, and it will be very difficult to dislodge Russia from the Arctic. Now let's look at the structural facts, the unchangeable realities that constrain what's possible. Let's start with the foundational reality. Climate change is opening new shipping routes through the Arctic. The Northeast Passage along Russia's coast is becoming navigable. The Northwest Passage through Canada is becoming navigable. These routes cut shipping distances dramatically. A ship traveling from Asia to Europe can save weeks by going through the Arctic instead of through the Suez Canal. This matters enormously for global commerce. And as ice melts, these routes become more accessible, more valuable, more strategically important. This is not debatable. This is happening. Arctic routes are opening. And whoever controls these routes will control a critical piece of global commerce. Here is the second structural reality. The Arctic contains enormous natural resources: oil, natural gas, rare earth minerals, rare metals. Some estimates suggest 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of natural gas reserves are in the Arctic. These resources are becoming accessible as ice recedes. Economically, Arctic resources will become increasingly valuable over time. Russia controls the largest portions of Arctic territory. Russia is positioned to exploit these resources before anyone else can. Russia has built infrastructure, has bases, has positioned itself to access Arctic resources first. America has no comparable infrastructure or positioning in the Arctic. Here is the third structural reality. Russia has military dominance in the Arctic. Russia has bases throughout Arctic regions. Russia has icebreakers. Russia has the world's largest icebreaker fleet. Russia has submarines optimized for Arctic operations. Russia has troops trained for Arctic warfare. Russia has established the infrastructure to project military power in the Arctic. America has almost none of this. America has limited icebreaker capacity. America has few bases in the Arctic. America does not have the military infrastructure to contest Russian dominance in the Arctic. Building this infrastructure would take years and cost enormous amounts of money. And Russia would continue building during that time. So the structural military reality is clear. Russia has Arctic dominance. America does not. And catching up would be extraordinarily difficult. Here is the final structural reality. America is militarily and strategically distracted. America is focused on China and Asia. America is managing concerns in the Middle East. America is dealing with Russia and Ukraine and Europe. America has stretched military capacity. America has a budget constraint. America cannot simultaneously establish dominance in every region that matters. America is making a strategic choice to focus on Asia and Middle East. That strategic choice means America is ceding the Arctic. Russia is filling the space America is leaving. This is not inevitable. It is a choice. America could choose to prioritize the Arctic. But America has not made that choice. And by the time America does make that choice, it will be too late. Russia will have established dominance that is extraordinarily difficult to dislodge. Now, let me tell you what Russia is actually doing in the Arctic. And I want you to follow this carefully because it is a multi-layered strategic move. On the surface, Russia is establishing military bases throughout the Arctic. Russia is rebuilding Cold War-era bases. Russia is establishing new bases. Russia is placing submarines, missiles, and troops in Arctic positions. This establishes military dominance. This ensures that if conflict ever comes to the Arctic, Russia controls it. But more importantly, this signals to the world that Russia is serious about Arctic control. Russia is not making vague claims. Russia is establishing concrete military presence. On the second layer, Russia is positioning itself to extract Arctic resources. Russia is developing oil fields. Russia is developing natural gas fields. Russia is developing rare earth mining operations. Economic control is power. Whoever controls Arctic resources will have economic leverage. Russia is ensuring that Russia controls these resources. Russia is establishing infrastructure to extract, process, and ship these resources. Russia is building pipelines. Russia is building ports. Russia is creating the economic architecture of Arctic dominance. On the third layer, Russia is positioning itself to control Arctic shipping routes. Russia controls the Northeast Passage along its coast. Russia can grant or deny access to these routes. Russia can charge tolls for transit. Russia can establish security requirements. Russia can use shipping route control as leverage. As Arctic shipping becomes more important, route control becomes a source of power. Russia is ensuring it controls this power. Russia is establishing ports, bases, and infrastructure along the routes it controls. On the fourth layer, Russia is building partnerships with Arctic nations and with China. Russia is making deals with Norway, Finland, Canada. Russia is building relationships with China for Arctic cooperation. Russia is establishing the diplomatic infrastructure to defend its Arctic interests and to prevent international opposition to Russian Arctic dominance. When other nations challenge Russian Arctic claims, Russia has allies to support it. Russia is not standing alone. Russia is part of a coalition defending Russian Arctic interests. On the fifth layer, Russia is controlling the narrative about the Arctic. Russia is saying, the Arctic is our region. We have historic claims. We have the capability to develop it. We have the right to control it. And the world should accept our Arctic dominance. Russia is not forcing this narrative through military threat. Russia is establishing it through presence, through infrastructure, through capability demonstration. By the time the world realizes the Arctic matters, Russia will have already established dominance so complete that challenging it will seem futile. Now, I want to present the opposing argument, because if I only argue one side, I am not being honest with you. The American argument actually has merit. Here it is. America is right that the Arctic matters. America is right that American interests are at stake in the Arctic. America has not completely abandoned the Arctic. America is part of international forums discussing Arctic governance. America is conducting research. America is maintaining some military presence. Furthermore, America argues that international law governs the Arctic. The Arctic is not Russian territory simply because Russia claims it. International law says nations can control exclusive economic zones within 200 nautical miles of their coast. Beyond that, the Arctic is international waters. Russia cannot unilaterally control the Arctic. International law prevents that. Furthermore, America argues that alliances matter. Canada is America's ally. Scandinavia is part of NATO. These nations will not allow Russian dominance of the Arctic to go unchallenged. America has allies in the Arctic region. America will not be alone. This is not empty logic. There is substance here. International law is real. Alliances are real. America is not completely absent from the Arctic. But here is the critical flaw in the American argument. It assumes that international law can be enforced without power. It assumes that alliances will hold even when power distributions shift. But international law without the power to enforce it is just words, and alliances weaken when one partner is distracted elsewhere. Russia is exploiting this gap. Russia is filling the power vacuum because America is distracted. And by the time American alliances mobilize to oppose Russian Arctic dominance, Russia will have facts on the ground that make challenging Russian dominance extraordinarily costly. Now, let's look forward. What actually happens from this point? Because Russia's Arctic dominance has forced America into a position where it must make choices. And there are clear paths forward. In this scenario, America never prioritizes the Arctic. America continues to focus on Asia and Middle East. Russia continues building Arctic dominance. By 2035 to 2040, Russia has complete control of Arctic shipping routes, Arctic resources, and Arctic military positioning. America belatedly realizes the Arctic matters, but finds that challenging Russian dominance is extraordinarily costly. American allies in the region have already accommodated themselves to Russian dominance. Challenging it now would be seen as destabilizing. So America accepts Russian Arctic hegemony as a fact. Russia has won the Arctic without firing a shot. In this scenario, America realizes the Arctic is becoming important. America mobilizes NATO allies. America increases military presence in the Arctic. America builds icebreaker capacity. America establishes bases. The Arctic becomes contested. Russia and NATO compete for dominance. This leads to escalating military buildups, increased tension, and potential for military incidents. Eventually, a military crisis could erupt. But this path requires America to make the Arctic a priority, which America has not yet done. In this scenario, international community agrees on Arctic governance through treaties and agreements. Resources are divided fairly. Shipping routes are managed internationally. Military presence is limited through arms control agreements. This is the most peaceful outcome, but it requires all parties, Russia, America, China, European nations, to agree to constraints. And Russia has little incentive to agree to constraints when Russia is winning under current conditions of minimal international enforcement. My assessment: I assess that path one is most likely. Not because it is inevitable, but because it requires the least dramatic action from everyone involved. America can continue its current strategy. Russia can continue building dominance. There is no conflict, no crisis, no disruption. Just a quiet shift in global power where Russia wins the Arctic through strategic positioning and American distraction. So to summarize what I have shown you, Russia is not conquering the Arctic through military invasion. Russia is simply filling a power vacuum that America is ignoring. America is distracted by immediate threats elsewhere. America has not yet realized that the Arctic is becoming the most strategically important region of the 21st century. By the time America realizes this, Russia will have established dominance so complete that challenging it will be extraordinarily difficult. This is not prophecy, it is structural analysis. Russia has incentives to dominate the Arctic. America does not currently prioritize the Arctic. Russia has military capacity in the Arctic. America does not. Russia is building infrastructure. America is not. These facts suggest a clear outcome. Russia will establish Arctic hegemony. America will belatedly recognize this as a strategic loss. But by then, it will be too late to change the outcome without enormous cost. The Arctic is being decided right now, but the world is watching elsewhere. And that is exactly how Russia likes it. Thank you for watching. If this analysis gave you something meaningful to consider, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this with someone who understands that global power is shifting in ways most people don't notice. Leave a comment below and tell me whether you think America will eventually contest Russian Arctic dominance or accept it as a fait accompli. That choice will determine the Arctic's future.